Welcome to Kvetchfest. I'm Jen.
And I'm Debbie.
We're Jewish.
So we like to kvetch.
I like to complain.
And I like to discuss things.
I grew up with my mom talking about all sorts of stuff. So I thought it would be fun to bring her onto Kvetchfest so we can have more conversations about life, politics, and everything in between.
I'm a boomer.
And I'm a millennial.
Our different perspectives could lead to shared insights, differing opinions, and new realizations about the world, ourselves, and our relationship. Be part of our community as we explore more together in relationship as parent and child.
Complaining can be cathartic, so let's kvetch together. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kvetchfest. I'm Jen.
I'm Debbie.
And today we're going to be talking about OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Uh-oh. We have a lot to talk about. I don't know if we can fit it into an hour.
Oh my goodness.
First of all, I'll just start by saying I started noticing my OCD. Well, I didn't even know what it was when I noticed it because I was 8 years old when I started noticing that I was touching light switches or stepping 5 times before getting into bed. I'm trying to think of other things like blinking at cracks in the wall. I mean, I have some really weird, well, I won't judge myself. Some really interesting compulsions that have changed and morphed throughout my life. But a lot of them have stayed the same, like counting odd numbers, taking 3 sips at a time, things like that. Mom, did I come to you with my symptoms, or I don't know if it's called symptoms, but did you notice it yourself from me as a child, or did I talk to you about it? Because I feel like I did talk to you, but I don't remember.
Well, first of all, I want to say I have OCD about talking about OCD.
Oh no, it's like, what is it, like a superstition?
Exactly. God, you're on the same wavelength, okay. Like a superstition for
all
sure.
Right.
Did you come to me? No, I started to notice that you were tapping the glass at the dinner table or whenever you had a glass.
I still do that.
Yeah, and I was watching that and I asked you about it and you said you felt like you had to do it. And I said, it's fine as long as it's not disrupting your life.
Yes, you did say that a lot.
Right, yeah. Right.
That's true.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Or do you remember the summer that I had to constantly check my heart beating when you took me to summer school, when you were teaching summer school, and you took me aside and you said, if you have to feel your heart beating, you're okay, you're alive.
Yes, I do remember that. Yes.
Children with anxiety, it must be fun to parent.
I'm going to say probably you came by that honestly genetically because palpitations and the focus on palpitations was something I had heard about when I was growing up with my mother.
Oh.
Yeah. So my mother had a cousin and they would talk about palpitations and they would talk, they would talk themselves through to comfort themselves with palpitations. And so I think my and I understand that to be a focus in my life, but more wrapped around anxiety attacks and palpitations.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Not sitting calmly on the couch after eating dinner and then suddenly you have palpitations that you're like, what the hell's going on with me?
Well, now I know that that's probably digestion and maybe something I ate that was caffeinized. Is that a word? Caffeinized?
No. You're hilarious.
Caffeinized.
We're going to have a glossary of all the words you've created on this podcast.
And that I was
Debbie's glossary of words.
Well, I had something that weird. I know we're getting out of order a little bit, but I had something weird that happened to me when I was a young adult. If I would drink alcohol, like if I had a glass of wine, and then I had a chaser of coffee at the end of the meal, I had this thing that would happen when I would wake up in bed, and I would have this thing that my jaw would get stiff, and I couldn't talk. But I think that was being overly caffeinated. And that was just something and then I would get nervous and that would turn into a panic attack.
Am I not your child? I feel like I say this on every podcast. Like, the ancestry runs deep, okay?
Your epigenome. I can't be responsible for all of it, but yeah.
Damn, you can't even run from it. You just have to really practice healing yourself and practice coping mechanisms to move through these things. Because
Yes.
I think that's why I don't really drink alcohol, because it just makes me feel bad. I get instant heart palpitations. I just want to have fun, and I can't do that. And you don't need alcohol to have fun, of course. I have plenty of fun being sober. That's not a problem. But it's just, but yeah, it's like those things where I feel like, oh, like I was at dinner with friends a couple weeks back and I was having heart palpitations while I was eating dinner, and I was just like, I just want to focus
Right.
on having a good time and not if my body's going to collapse. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, breathing through your nose and going out. I've been doing that even now, because what's going on in the world right now is I realize I'm anxious, and I wake up
Yes.
anxious. So I do a lot of nasal breathing and then exhaling through my mouth, and that has calmed me down. Also, it's because recently I went to get my blood pressure taken, and every time I go to get my blood pressure taken, I feel like I'm trying to pass a test. And so I get very
Yeah.
nervous about it. And I had this amazing nurse, shout out to Kaiser, an amazing nurse at Kaiser. She goes, "You are going to have a normal don't worry about it, but a normal blood pressure test." And she turned the
Yeah.
lights off and she goes, "I'm going to meditate with you." And we
Oh.
meditated, and she talked. We're both going to do it together. She was at her monitor because she was timing stuff and doing her thing. So I looked and I saw what she was doing. I had my eyes closed, and she got my blood pressure way down in that thing. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was
Wow. That's amazing.
surprised. I was really surprised that it actually worked on me. And it got me the confidence to go finally buy, because I had a blood pressure monitor in my cart that I was going to buy. She goes, "Don't buy it from Amazon. Go downstairs to the pharmacy, get it from there, go home and learn how to use it." So I just got it, and I'm going to learn how to use it so I don't have to go in. They will take my word for it if I do it on my own, and it will
Oh.
relieve. And then I was with my cousins
Oh.
just recently for brunch, and one of my cousins said that she gets white coat high blood pressure as well, where she gets in there. And I have to stop thinking about myself and anxiety or OCD or whatever the things that I've had in the past or in the present as like I'm failing some kind of test. I used to feel
Yes.
that way. Now I'm trying to feel more like everybody has things, and it's not bad or good, and it's not that you failed yourself somewhere. This is just who you
Yeah.
are. Because I think, like you were saying,
Yeah.
you can have fun without alcohol. I feel like a lot of people drink alcohol to have a good time, where they think it's going to relax and whatever. And a lot of people don't talk about how it makes them feel the next day or that night before they go to sleep. Because I know
Yeah.
I'll come home after having a meal, and maybe I'll have a drink, which is very far and few between, and I'll have heartburn when I get home,
Right.
and it's the
Oh my God.
alcohol. I can
Yes,
taste,
that's alcohol.
right? And I'm like,
Yes.
damn it, I really like bourbon, but bourbon doesn't like me. So I think there's a lot of people who just don't talk about the fact
Yeah.
that they're doing things they know in the moment they really enjoy it, like I do, and then the consequence of that action. And I'm not talking about drinking multiple drinks. I'm saying having a drink or two with a large meal or a decent meal. I mean, we went out for Valentine's Day, and
Yeah.
I had an old fashioned, and he warned me ahead of time that this old fashioned is going to be a little bit more of a kicker than I might be used to. And I'm like, fine. And so I had a couple of sips, and we had our whole entire meal. And I got up
Yeah.
and I thought, "Oh, mama, this drink got to me, and I didn't even realize it until I stood up."
Oh wow, Mom.
Even
Yep,
after I
put a
ate
lot
a
of alcohol in.
salad and I had the main dish and I had some bread, it was still,
Yeah.
because I'm not metabolizing it well. And I don't think I ever metabolized alcohol well, even when I was younger.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, even in my 20s, drinking have to go to the bathroom in the morning after drinking whiskey. You know
Right.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's not a good. My tummy would be all upset.
Yeah.
You know, it's just. I mean, it's a poison. At the end of the day, alcohol is a poison,
Right.
and it's really not good for you.
Right.
I mean,
But it's
that's
fun, and
just the truth.
once in a while can't
Yeah.
be bad. So I think that what
Yeah.
happens is we attach certain experiences to with anxiety, and that becomes sort of an OCD thing. So my first experience
Yes.
with OCD, you were saying you were 8. Mine was a little bit
Yeah.
later. Mine was
Okay.
when we actually left where I grew up and moved out of state. And I had
That'll
a
do it.
huge issue with that. I did not
Yeah.
realize, how could anybody know that
Right.
that was going to be the beginning of my OCD and the beginning of a little bit of disassociation while I was there as well. I remember telling my
Yeah.
mom, I don't feel like I'm here. And she was like, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, I know I'm here, but I don't feel like I'm attached. And that scared the shit out of me, honestly.
Oh, yeah. Well, Mom, you remember when I said that to you when I was about that age too, when I said I don't feel like I'm here.
Right,
And I think I was on basketball practice one of the times it happened.
right,
And then you took me home early. And then you asked my brother, like, have you ever felt that way?
right.
But we had a whole conversation, but you never told me during that point that you also felt that way as
Oh, I
a
didn't share that then?
young. I
Yeah,
mean, you could have, I don't
yeah. I was
remember.
12.
But
Yeah,
you were 12?
yeah,
Okay.
at the
Yeah,
time.
because disassociation, I didn't know what that was until my 20s,
Right,
but I had experienced it all throughout high school, especially walking down hallways.
right,
I would feel like this out of body experience where I was just like, is what's happening around me my reality?
right.
And it would scare me too. I would have like a whole, like my body would react. I would get like kind of a shock throughout my body. And then my heart would start beating fast. I don't know if that happened to you,
Well, I think that
but
sometimes I just felt like I wasn't there when I was there. And I know I was there, I have
yeah,
memories of being there. And other
right.
times I would have an anxiety attack. It didn't really go necessarily together. And I
Yeah.
started probably having anxiety attacks when we got back. So while I was
Yeah.
there, I developed what my mom called ritualistic behavior or
Yeah.
routinized behavior, where I would have a routine around certain things. And
Yeah.
I never felt, well, I won't say never. It didn't keep me from going out with friends and going to school or anything like that. But I did
Mm-hmm.
feel a compulsion that if I didn't do that, something was going to happen. And so that's control. That's a control thing.
Mm-hmm.
When you feel like your extraneous life, for whatever reason, is out of control and you have to contain yourself, you do it
Yes.
through ritualized behavior. And I had that behavior. It would ebb and flow, but it ramped up for me when I got into it was ramped up a little bit when I got back from out of state and back to my home school. And I had to reconnect with friends who weren't necessarily the same as they were the year before. And I didn't
Yeah.
quite know how to deal with that. And my mom said, well, you can not have friends, or you can be with them and not like what they're doing and not do it, or you could make new friends. And I made new friends, and many of those friends are still my friends today. So I feel
Yeah.
like I made a good decision. And then it ramped up again for me. Then it dissipated and ramped up again for me when I was in high school. And I think that's because my parents were going through a breakup of their marriage.
Sure.
And I would have a hard time going to class, and I would worry the whole time I was in class if I was going to have an anxiety attack and what would I do if I
Yeah.
did. And I had a couple of not so nice teachers that also weren't noticing that some of my behavior was fragile at the time.
Yeah.
And they would sort of admonish me instead of support me. And so
Ugh.
that was very horrible. And then
Yeah.
then I went to therapy. I went to therapy when I was 17, when my parents were having their divorce. And then I started to learn tricks to help me, but I didn't get
Mm-hmm.
really good at those tricks for a long while. It took me a while to figure out what was going to comfort me. And usually it's
Right.
talking to somebody who I love and feel comfortable
Mm-hmm.
with. So I know I called you not too long ago, and my mother was really a comfort. She would know exactly what to say to me to kind of get me down the ladder, so to speak, to
That's how
get
I
me
feel
off the
about
roof.
you.
Well, thank you. So I try
Yeah.
to remember the things that she told me in
Yeah.
order to still feel comforted. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
an older person now, so I'm pretty good at identifying what's going on. But that still doesn't mean that at times I feel now my anxiety is wrapped around aging. And that's
Yeah.
a subject I'd like to delve into one time on a separate thing. But and I
Sure.
think maybe I've mentioned it before, but it's the anxiety of
Yeah.
mortality and how I feel that I'm in my late 60s and what I've seen happen to other people my age and older, And I freak out a little bit about those things, but I try to tamp that down and say, you're doing things
Yeah.
that you're supposed to be doing, basically, and whatever. But yeah. So anyway, that was my progression with that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I noticed the tapping. I don't know exactly what else you were doing.
Yeah.
That
I mean, that's around the age that I also started to have body focused repetitive behaviors, which I think coincides. A lot of people who have compulsions like OCD have body focused repetitive behaviors. So mine is dermatillomania, other people's is
yeah, I
cuticles,
have
other
that.
people is biting nails or pulling your
Right.
hair. And so those are all kind of tied into the same situation.
Right.
I also noticed mine ebbing and flowing as well. And then I think around my late 20s, early 30s, it kind of just stayed the same. And now it's just, it probably affects my life and my day to day life in a way that is probably, I would say, not healthy, but I've always coped with it. And I've always been, I mean, I'm so used to dealing with my OCD that I don't know what it would be like to not have it. Like it would be probably really relieving, honestly. So I went a couple weeks without having my dip nails
Right.
because I get my dip nails done because it helps me. It's the only thing that's essentially quote unquote cured my dermatillomania pretty much because I can't pick my skin because it's so blunt.
Right.
My nails become so blunt with the layers of the stuff that I can't do it. And when I didn't have it, I noticed so much of my energy was going to self soothing, which is picking my skin. And I wasn't productive. I couldn't focus on conversations like as well. I immediately lower self esteem. And I knew this back in my 20s when I would get into arguments in relationships. And it was because I didn't feel good about myself because of my skin. And I realized, like, oh, how entrenched that is for me. It was like the first time I made those connections in my 20s because I didn't really know a lot about what I was going through. I had to do a lot of research. I mean, there's not a lot of information out there
Right.
at the time. And so, yeah, immediately when I got the dip again, I was like, oh my gosh, I have my life back. So I wonder if I were to go on, I mean, there's not really medications for OCD, but there is anti-anxiety meds, of course. But I wonder if I went on an actual higher dose of meds, because I have tried Lexapro in the past, but I was on like 2.5 milligrams. So it's not really that much. Or if I was to go to like, it's a specific type of therapy. I think it's called CBT therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Cognitive
behavioral.
behavioral. Yeah, I wonder if I were to do that, if that would I would see a significant change because I'm only doing talk therapy right now and I like it, but I probably need something more robust to help treat my behaviors because I do think it impacts me. I mean, especially now that my partner and I just recently moved, and I was telling them last night, like, wow, my OCD is really bad right now because we just moved and now it's a whole other stressor.
Right.
And it's a whole other day to day. And it's, even though it's the same because you're doing the same things wherever you move to, essentially, it's still remapping everything and you're living out of boxes. Anyway, it's stressful. So my OCD it has been at an all-time high, but I have been telling myself 2025 is the year that I just tell my OCD to shut up because it's like a voice in my head.
Yeah.
And my partner will ask me, what do you do when you get stuck in a cycle of a compulsion and you can't get out of it? And I tell them I clap my hands really loud or I scream no.
Yeah.
Either in my head or out loud.
Right.
And it kind of breaks up the energy so I can move forward. But a lot of the times I just submit to my compulsions, which it is what it is. You have to just navigate it how you navigate it. And it does feel, though, I don't know what it's like to have schizophrenia or like multiple personality disorder,
Right.
anything like that. But in my head, it feels another person's in there sometimes telling me I have to do this or someone's going to die or someone. Basically, that's like such high stakes, right?
Right.
And that's why you continue to do it.
Yes.
Because it's such high stakes. It's not like, oh, you're going to break a glass or whatever.
Well, it's like being at a dam and you're trying to plug the holes so that the village doesn't get drowned out or whatever. Flooded. That's the word. You asked me earlier what it would be like if you didn't have it. And I feel like, when you write like this extensive term paper and then it's done and you don't have to think about it again and you relieve yourself of that. It's like anything like that. When you've done something for so long and then all of a sudden it stops and you're going, oh, that is so relieving. I don't have to think about that anymore.
Yeah.
right?
Yes,
Right. And you
I
just,
feel like it would be,
right.
wow,
If,
the world truly would be my oyster.
right. In fact, you don't even realize you're not thinking about it anymore until all of a sudden one day, or somebody does something in front of you that you may have used to done. And then you go, oh yeah, I used to do that. I mean, do you
Hmm.
remember when we went up with the Girl Scout troop to Solvang?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we stayed in that motel with the girls and everything. Then I think I was in my 40s. That was the whole thing with the towel rack. I needed to make sure the towel was equidistant on each side and the bottom was folded in half, and then I could leave and go do my thing. And I watched myself do that, and I intellectualized, what the hell am I doing? And I think over time, when I became more confident in the ability to to feel like I was in control and not all the stuff around me was going to shit, I then
Hmm.
didn't have to do those things anymore.
That's nice. Yeah.
That's what happened to me. I'm not to say that once
Hmm.
in a while I do worry about things, and I'll say stop in my head, stop, because my therapist said you could put your hand up physically
Hmm.
and stop yourself, or stop the person who's in your face, whatever, or not touching them, but just say stop, or just say to
Yeah.
yourself stop, like you kind of do the same thing. And that
Hmm.
rewires your brain in that moment, and you go on to something else, or you intentionally put things in. So when I was younger, if I was feeling like I would wake up with anxiety attacks when I was younger. And I would immediately, so I made it a point to keep a fill it in, not a crossword puzzle, but a fill it in puzzle next to me. Fill it in, it's all blank, and they give you all these words, and you have to figure out how they all. And as soon as I got my mind on that, it was over. And the
Hmm.
vibration that my body had built itself up to in order for me to have to do that started to wane. I would go back to bed. And so when I would
Hmm.
travel, I would take those with me in the event
Hmm.
that I might have something like that while I was, you know. And I still think about that. I
Yeah.
mean, there are times where I go somewhere and I'm going to do something, and I start worrying about in my head, well, where should I sit in the auditorium? What if I should probably be on the end because I just want to get out? Or I remember
Yeah.
one time my mother, grandma was performing in a small jewel box theater, and I was dead center and I started having an anxiety attack, and I needed to get out, and I had to
Yeah.
crawl through 15 people to get the hell out of there. And I was so embarrassed because I didn't want to hurt anybody on the way out, but I just needed to get out. And that was after your
Yeah.
dad had passed away. And the idea of enjoyment at that time was really difficult for me because I was so embroiled in such a big mess at that
Yeah.
time that as soon as I got relaxed, my body was like, "Oh no, 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 that ain't happening." And
That's not,
yeah,
no.
no, you have a lot to worry about. So come on,
Yeah.
get on your
We don't know what that feeling is. We're
right,
not going to let you.
right, right. So yeah, I went through all that, and
Hmm.
it's going to sound crazy or not, but I'm glad because it's certainly not fun while it's happening. And recently you were part of that with me. It's not fun and it feels scary, but you begin to realize that you're an empath with feelings, and you're analytical. And
Hmm.
this is why this happens. And so
Yeah.
essentially it's a good thing if you know
Yeah.
how to sort of keep it calm and to help yourself through that, and to pat
Yeah.
yourself on the back afterwards, because if you were perhaps a colder, meaner person, these things wouldn't be happening to you. You'd be more
Right.
distant from your feelings, and therefore you wouldn't be feeling these things.
Absolutely. Yeah. People with anxiety, I think they do feel a lot. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that you have anxiety. It just means you're feeling and you're aware. And though it's difficult to navigate sometimes, it is a reminder of maybe a good thing in some ways that you're in tune with what's happening,
Right.
either to yourself or in the outside world.
Oh, absolutely. I think with
Yeah.
some of the things you were talking about earlier about skin and stuff. Well, my father, he used to finally, when he realized, he would go get his nails done. He would go get a manicure when in his older years, like when he was,
Uh-huh.
well, not older, but when he was in his 40s, and he would get they put clear nail polish on because he was constantly biting his nails due to anxiety. And so that helped him not do that. And I think cuticle things runs in the women. It's the women in our family
Yeah.
have that. So I can
Yeah.
see the natural progression to something more intense if the anxiety is more intense for you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I just bypassed the nail biting and the cuticles and went straight to
right,
the skin.
right. You said,
Yay for generational trauma. I
right.
love it.
I'm not going to do the easy thing. I'm going to go right to the harshest thing
Yeah.
and punish myself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I gotta feel pain to move through it. I don't know what it is. I
right,
don't know why dermatillomania chose me, but it has, and here we are navigating it
right.
in my 30s.
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
okay because, as we get older, the more you know, the better you do. That's how I
Yes,
feel about things
that's
for
true.
sure. I
Hmm.
remember awfulizing about something stupid. So when I was in that year that I was out of state, it was brutal. The whole situation was brutal because the culture, the educational culture where I went to school was completely different. It was volatile and
Yeah.
punitive, and they had paddles. I didn't grow up with
Ugh.
paddles, and some of the student they had massive racial issues in that state, and
Yeah.
which is still a red state to this day. And so there was aggression. It was just a very ramped up, not fun situation for me. And I remember having a lot of anxiety there. And I remember people are going to think that we're out of our minds. But anyway, I'm being vulnerable because I think that's what this podcast is about. If you
It
don't
is
talk
about
about this
vulnerability.
stuff, then
Vulnerability is strength.
right.
Yes.
So I remember getting out of class at lunchtime and
Hmm.
being really hungry and needed to go to the bathroom and having a hard time between choosing, should I sit down and go eat or should I go to the bathroom?
Yeah.
It was a huge turmoil for me. And I'm like,
Yeah.
nobody else seems to be having these turmoils. Why am I having the turmoil?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and
I still have that turmoil.
well, but I just felt like, oh my God. I think it was because I was deathly afraid of fainting. So I thought if I get more hungry, I might faint. So if I go to the bathroom, that might happen. So I went home and talked to my mom about it. And I'm so
Yeah.
happy I had a mother who didn't laugh at me or say, what the
Oh.
frig are you talking about? She didn't do any of that stuff. She said, here's the
Yeah.
thing. You can be hungry and it's okay. Your body will handle being hungry. You're not that hungry. You had breakfast that morning. So just go to the
Hmm.
bathroom and then go enjoy your lunch. But I was 12. I was a young middle
Yeah.
schooler, by the way. I didn't,
Right.
I turned 13 at the beginning of ninth grade, like
Gosh.
the
Yeah.
tail end of eighth grade and the beginning of ninth grade.
Yeah.
Everything was all tangled for me. It was hard for me to unwind that
Yeah.
anxiety.
Well, it's hard when you have two important things that are happening
Right,
concurrently in your body. And I still deal with this all the time because if I get over hungry, I lose all sort of executive
right,
functioning. I don't know what to do first.
right,
If you have to go to the bathroom really badly, but you're also really hungry, what's the first step?
right.
So I understand it. I am your child.
Yeah,
But mom, I had no idea that you struggled so much with different things. And it's really shining a light on my own experiences growing up that I wish I had known earlier, or if I did know, I wish I hadn't forgotten. But some of these things I don't think I did, I was not privy to. But I will say too, the story of you being young, or a young 12-year-old trying to figure out bathroom or food. Do you remember when I went to Girl Scout camp?
oh yes. You never wanted to go again. That was it. No more Girl Scouts.
Well, that's because I learned about dehydration the hard way. Which is to say, a child with anxiety like me going basically I was dealing with several things at that age, but one of them was we slept in tents that had a concrete platform with a frame tent,
Oh yeah.
okay,
Uh-huh.
and cots. And I was jazzed about this. I thought this was so cool. At the same time, I was terrified of sleepwalking out of my tent into the forest and no one would find me. Because that's what I was at the age where I was sleepwalking. On the other flip side of that, we would go on hikes and I think I maybe wasn't drinking enough water and I was not feeling good.
Hmm.
I had headaches. I did not feel good. And so the camp counselors were like, you need to drink water. So then, of course, I went the whole other end of the spectrum where I was guzzling the water the whole time. And because the only time I felt really good was in the pool because they had pool time. And I was like, oh, I feel great being in the water.
Right.
Maybe that's my Piscesness.
Right.
And I was also guzzling water. And so I was like, okay, I feel much better guzzling water. And they'd be like, okay, you have to drink water until your pee is clear. And I was like, got it. I understand the assignment. And so I would go check the porta, they had porta potties or whatever. I'd check my pee every time, and make sure. Yeah, I guess you can't really check in a porta potty, but there was something where I was able to check it. But I remember being in line for the mess hall for dinner, and I had drank so much water. I was standing in line. I was like, I'm about to pee my pants. Can I go use the porta potties? And the camp counselors wouldn't let me for some reason. And I was like at my wit's end. And finally they let me go. And by the time I closed the door, I was peeing myself. Mm-hmm. All over my clothes, and I was so embarrassed. And I remember just being like, well, that is what it is, I guess. And just kind of trying to figure it out, clean myself up as best I could at 8. But yeah, that was a horrible experience in that way. I think I just had a lot of anxiety. It's maybe my first time leaving home too for 4 days?
Yeah, it was the weekend. I was 8 years old as well when I went to Brownie camp. And I went with my mom because my mom was the leader of my troop. And for some reason, and I don't know why my mom allowed it, but they wouldn't let me be in the same cabin. We didn't have a tent. We had a cabin as my mom. Mm-hmm. So I was in the same predicament because we had to walk out from the cabin to a bathroom. And mm-hmm. I was shy, and I didn't want to tell the person who was in our cabin, the leader who I didn't know, that I need to go to the bathroom. And I suffered greatly during the night until finally, knowing that I wouldn't be able to hold it anymore, went up and woke her up and said, I have to go to the bathroom. And they took me. But I wish I had been with my mother because that wouldn't have been so difficult for me. I would have said, Mom, I have to go to the bathroom. And she would take me to the bathroom. But this was a lead. And I've always had that element of shyness about me where I don't want to bother anybody, and I think I can handle it, and I control myself. But this, I couldn't. I was 8, and I needed to go to the bathroom. And so I have that too. Not because I was told I was going to dehydrate, but just because I went a whole day and didn't use the bathroom, because as kids often do, they get involved in activities, and they don't think about going to the bathroom until, oh my God, I need to go to the bathroom.
Why are we like this though, Mom? Why can't we express our needs to people so that we can get help? Why can't we do that for ourselves?
I'm supposing for me, because I also did that on a date when I was 19. So it's because part of it is because we don't want to embarrass ourselves. Part of it is because we don't want to bother somebody, I think. I remember going on a date when I was in college, and it was during the summer, and my date we were going to go bowling, and I was in the car with him, and I'm like, holy crap, I need to go to the bathroom. Like, oh my God. And we get to the bowling alley, and we get out of the car, and he sees somebody he knows and wants to have a conversation. And I just looked at him and said, I've got to go to the bathroom. And just like you, I got there just in the nick. I pulled my jeans down, and thankfully I didn't get wet. Yeah. But I'm like, why did I do that? Why? I've done that often in my life where something has happened and I haven't said anything until I can deal with it on my own.
I know. And it's so interesting because that's where I got the nickname Ghost when I used to live with roommates in college. Aww. They'd call me Ghost because I would never announce myself. I would just so quiet in the house. And I'm still this way to this day. I don't really know how to take up space, I guess is what it is.
Yes, I think the
vocally or physically.
I think it's the invisibility of it. I still regret, like it happened yesterday, being at a friend's house and dropping a necklace that my grandmother had got me down the sink and not saying to anybody, I dropped my necklace down the sink. Can you just open up the P-trap and we can see if we can get it? I said nothing. And And then my grandmother asked me weeks later, where's the necklace and what you don't like it and how come you're not wearing it? And I didn't have the fortitude to say I dropped it down the sink and I never told anybody. And I kind of feel like it's still in there. There's a part of me that thinks that thing is still there. Doubtful, but it could
Maybe.
have.
I mean, maybe they never remodeled. Who
Right,
knows?
right. So, but how stupid am I that I
Don't say that to
could,
yourself.
well, but how ridiculous is it that I didn't have the assertiveness
Yeah.
to say I made a mistake? Where did who told me that
I know.
it wasn't okay to make a mistake? I believe that I internalized that because I had two very young parents who were probably making a freaking boatload of mistakes. Thankfully, not with my survival and safety.
Yeah.
But I could tell they were vulnerable, and I didn't want to add to any of that vulnerability. And then that just extended out into other realms of my life, because I am around people even now that I am so surprised how at ease they are with doing and saying and whatever for themselves.
I know.
And I just don't do that. I don't broadcast certain things, except I am on this. But I mean,
well, we're gonna overshare, okay?
Right, exactly.
We're talking about things that people don't necessarily talk about, okay?
Right.
So we're being brave and vulnerable, and that's strength, okay?
Right. Yes, it is. But in my real life, not my podcast life.
In our okay, we're trying to practice what we preach, okay? We're not always good at it.
Right. So yeah, I think that comes from not wanting to be wrong. Not that my parents ever even imparted that on me. When I was a kid, it was like you make a decision. If that decision doesn't work, you just change your decision. I never got you make the decision, you got to live with that decision. I never heard that.
No, I know, and I love hearing about how your parents talk to you, because wow, it's how you talked to me.
Right.
And now I see where you got it from.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thankful for that.
Yeah.
They were.
And it's how I talk to students, it's like I kind of just level with them. I mean, they're just they're kids, but they can kind of take the reality of a situation. You know what I mean?
Can.
It's not, they can. I mean,
if it's rational, even though they're not completely rational beings yet, they even if they try to wiggle out, they really get the gist of the lesson. They do.
They really do. Yeah. And it's amazing to me every time when kids are smart and you're amazed at what they're actually paying attention to, because it's usually a little bit of everything. I know that doesn't make sense, but they're paying attention.
They are. Yeah. They observe and they pay attention. That's why the Stephen Sondheim song is so important. Children are listening. That song gets to me. I cannot listen to that song without tearing up, because we are doing such a disservice by not communicating things to kids in a really benevolent, loving manner. It doesn't mean that most of us aren't doing that, but I'm just saying there's a whole very punitive population out there, and kids don't need that, but they need to have people around them who are modeling upstanding behavior, because they are listening 100%. And they are watching. And we need to, if we can remember what upstanding behavior is, and we won't go there right now.
That's another episode.
Yes, exactly. But I think that you can also say that OCD and ritualistic behavior, and I'm not talking about religious ritualistic behavior and cult stuff. I'm talking about things that you determine for yourself as ritual for you.
Yeah.
In a way is also, can be, if you reframe it, comforting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's hard. It's a hard it's a hard sell. But you could say, I'm okay because I'm gonna make sure my bedspread is blah blah, or I'm gonna make sure the towel is this, or I'm gonna touch the doorknob twice before I leave, and then I can move on because I know I have made everything comfortable for myself at this moment in time.
Sure, but moments before you're making yourself a little crazy trying to do all the things to get out the door. But yes, my friend takes pictures.
Yes.
And so they joke about their phone camera just being a bunch of pictures of the stove,
Right.
So I started doing that too, and it helps me because especially if I'm like helping a friend cat sit, and that's why I was like, should I be a cat sitter? But I was like, I don't think I can. I mean, I would be really good at it because I'm very cognizant.
Right.
But just getting out the door, I would be nervous about locking it or whatever. Not because I wouldn't do it, but because my OCD would tell me that I didn't.
Or that the cat ran out, even though the cat didn't run out, and you'd be playing
I
dead.
know, and that's a specific type of OCD too.
Yeah.
Where it's like, and I have to tell myself all the time, your cats are in the house. You saw them both, and even if you didn't see a cat run out, so they're okay.
Right.
And it's just
It's like
I have to talk myself down.
Yeah, it's like gaslighting yourself.
But it's the first 20 minutes of my drive of just being like, the cats are fine, and this is a big part of me being like, well, should I have kids or not? Because if I have kids, wow, that's going to be real tough with my mental illness. How will I ever function again if I can barely function without that responsibility on 2 cats?
Well, the interesting thing is that you wind up sort of putting yourself back.
You adapt, right? Just like we do with everything.
Yeah, you have to adapt to that.
You do.
You just
positive reframe.
Yeah.
Well, I was talking to my aunt, and I was saying, oh, I have to commute or this or that, and she's like, well, you could say, I get to.
Right.
I get to.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's fair. I could reframe things for sure. I think that does help.
Yeah, no, I think reframing is another great tool. And Instagram, the plug to Instagram, has a lot of people out there who are showing people small things they can do, like tapping their bodies or putting their hand on their chest or things like that help you to sort of break that circuitry that's causing you to have the anxious moment or whatever that is. I think I mentioned it earlier. I don't know exactly when most of that went away from me, if not all of it, but I think it happened when I began to trust that I could actually control my own situation and that I could take charge and I didn't need to give that over to anybody. Not that I really did, but when you become a partner in a relationship and your partner does certain things that they like to do and you don't have to anymore, when they are not there and you have to do that thing, you kind of maybe build up a little fear about it, or you don't want to do it. And I've tried really hard because for 20 years I was not in a partnership, and now I've been in a partnership for almost 10 years. And there are times where I have to go places without my partner that we normally go together. And I have to say to myself, I'm fully able to do this because I did it all those years.
Yes.
Right? You start to lay back into the security of having somebody else, do those things. And so you don't want to.
Which is why, and I understand that, which is why I'm like, I've noticed this in my own relationship where I ask my partner to do something. They're like, can you just figure it out? And I'm like, oh, I guess I could. But it's like, that's such a big part of my personality is to like not take initiative sometimes and help me help myself.
Right.
And I really don't like that about myself. Something I'm learning to redo. But yeah, it's like I want to be independent, so I have to learn how to do some things, even if I'm scared of doing it.
Right.
It's just
things that you
or uncomfortable.
I think that it's like muscle memory or any kind of muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it. And so it's really easy to become, especially if your partner's willing, to become lackadaisical about things that you normally did, on your own. And I'm talking mostly like driving or traveling or that kind of stuff, not the daily stuff at home. But because that's just a division of labor. But just saying to yourself, he can't make it to this thing. So what? I can drive down there and figure out, because you become, he does the thing with the arm. I don't know where that parking lot is, or he always takes care of the whatever. And now I have to remember that, because you just lose part of that you used to take care of all the time. And I think that you don't want to do that, because that just adds to the anxiety when you have to do things on your own, right?
Totally. For me, it's like, I don't want to do that errand by myself.
Right.
It's more fun to do it with you or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that anything that any, I call them tricks. They're not necessarily tricks. They're ways to self-soothe, help you,
Yes.
and that you're not a bad person if you're going through something like that. And it's not something I want to share with everybody I know, obviously, but if the
Right.
conversation comes up, I will not say something. I probably will share to a certain extent. Same thing that
Totally.
when your dad passed away and I was teaching and I was working with younger I was always working with younger teachers pretty much. I was working with young women who didn't want to, who had gotten married and didn't want to stay in the classroom because their husbands could support them and they wanted to have children. And, women have a harder deal with that because of kids. And I would say to them, don't let your credential lapse. Don't let your credential lapse. But no, everything's going to be fine. Then you find out 2 or 3 years later that they got a divorce or something. And now they have a problem because they can't, and I'm like, no,
Yeah.
you've got to keep all those things in place. Whether or
Yes.
not you think this person you're living with is the best diamond in the world. People have their own mindsets and things happen and you need to protect yourself. Right. I would talk pretty openly about that kind of stuff so that they wouldn't fall into what I had to go through as a whole new career and the whole thing because of that. But divorces happen and stuff happens, and it's good to make sure that you're still in control. And yes, it can be frightening, and yes, it ramps up anxiety at times, but it's worth it.
Yes.
To not give over your control.
No,
on the big things.
I totally agree. Well, should we end by saying, well, I'm going to say something, which is something that my acting teacher just said to me.
Yes.
Which is, you always have your breath with you and it's free.
Oh.
So learning how to tap into your breath and breathing work with anxiety and with being in your body is always helpful.
Yes, that sounds lovely. And I'll say something that a therapist said to my mother. She said to him, when I get anxious, I'm afraid I might pass out. And he said, when you feel like you're anxious, lie down. And then you won't have to worry about if you pass out or not, because you'll already be lying down.
Solid advice.
So, okay, I can sort of get that feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, interesting. Your mom was afraid of fainting, and so were you.
Yeah, I probably internalized that.
Oh, wow. I was not. You didn't push that. You didn't put that onto me. So thank you.
Probably that's why I didn't share certain things because.
Yeah, maybe because you already saw my anxiety coming out. You're like, oh, shit. I didn't even share this with my child.
Well, let's just put it this way. All this stuff starts before your temporal lobes are developed. So it's hard to deal with.
That means it stays. It is hard to deal with.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. And then your temporal lobes start to diminish. Then you go to your children and say, well, I'm kind of going through what I did when my temporal lobes were not developed.
Oh, gosh, dang it. It never ends.
No. Being human is hard.
Just kidding. Yeah. It is hard. Being human is hard.
Being human is hard. It is worth it.
Being here is worth it. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yes. In all ways of functioning. I don't feel anxious at all now.
Oh, that's good, Mom. That makes one of us. We'd love to hear from you. Send in your complaints and maybe they'll be featured on the show. On some platforms, you can even leave a voice message, and you can also leave a typed message in the Q&A box on other platforms. So please reach out to us if you want advice, if you have questions. We have episodes out twice monthly, so every other week there's a brand new Kvetchfest episode. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Kvetchfest, where complaining is cathartic. And don't forget, if something's on your chest, kvetch it off.